Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video with myself and Mike today. Back together again, Mike. I'm sure you're happy to hear.
I'm glad to
Unfortunately,
have some organisation for once.
yeah. Unfortunately, it's not for particularly good news. Once again, a bit of controversy in the West Ham news world, and this time it's around Rob Newman, obviously the head of recruitment, head of scouting, and David Moyes, and potentially that this summer there's going to be some issues, and already issues are starting to come out. So let's get into it. Let's get where it's come from and what it could potentially mean for this summer. So it came out this morning, Mike. Obviously, Sean from West Ham Football has tweeted the following, saying Rob Newman could find himself without a job this summer after 18 months at West Ham due to poor returns on recruitment of players over the past year and a half. David Moyes could also find his transfer identification role diminished if he stays after the summer for his final year. It's a pretty big statement to put out. Obviously, the end of this season is now coming up, so this kind of stuff's going to start spewing in the media. But initial thoughts off the bat about the Rob. Let's start with Rob Newman before we move on to Moyes. But Rob Newman came in from Man City to kind of elevate our recruitment and bring in a caliber of player that kind of envisions and aligns with what we want to do as a club and move forward with. Do you think that last summer specifically, we can look at it here, 159 million roughly spent on players. You can kind of see the likes of Agard, Emerson, Areola, Kera, Paqueta, Scamacca, Cornet, Downs. Was that a successful window in your mind for someone that's just come into a job?
Yes. We saw one of the top European striking talents, like young striking talents. A guy that was not only looked at by PSG, but even Arsenal at one point had a look at him. Also, they went a different direction. They went for a more mobile player in Gabriel Jesus because it suited their play more. But this is a player who's been looked at. There's, again, interest from Italy. I think Napoli are one of the teams just about to win their first title in however many years. Yeah, but apparently he's a bad player because he's at West Ham. That's how our fans work. It's not working. It's never the manager's fault. It's always the player. And yet this was a guy who played in a very average Sassuolo team last year, got double figures, almost double figures for Genoa in a relegation battle in Serie A. Comes to the Premier League, yes, it's a different beast in that it is quicker, but he's not a bad player. He's shown him more than enough times he has the technical ability, the quickness in his feet, and in mind to play in this league.
Yeah,
he just does not have the personnel around him for me to kind of fulfill. And then you look at the likes of Paqueta, one of the top midfield talents in Europe, has been massively proven it now. Again, people will say that, he was adjusting. But also he was being absolutely and utterly misused and misunderstood, not only by the fan base, but by the manager. And now he's being kind of people reveling in how great he is. So this notion that it was a bad summer, for me, doesn't wash, because I think a competent manager who wants to play it progressive and open football not only capitalises on those types of players that were brought in this summer. Some of them I do think were poor, because I think he could have got better in Europe.
Yeah.
I don't think a manager would have got better. I just think we would not even be talking about the situation we're in right now in terms of the league.
Yeah.
It's just, I just find the whole situation laughable, because there's a number of players that have come up in that period that the manager has said no to. There's players that the manager has said no to in the past.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous. The fact that we said no to Julian Alvarez this time round. Last time round, apparently, I think there was rumours that we looked at Ruben Diaz. Moyes said no. We looked at James Maddison. Moyes said no. Leon Dendoncker. Moyes said no. These are players that have come to the Premier League who are fantastic signings.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that Moyes isn't a problem. That year, remember, Moyes went for Hugo. Before anyone turns around and says he signed Souček and he signed Bowen, the only thing he did in that signing was say yes. He had nothing to do with it. They were scouted prior to David Moyes even coming. Moyes was there for about 2 days, and they was asking about those deals, and he said, "I don't know much about them, but I'm waiting to see how they progress." We signed those players All he did was say, yes, he did not scout them. This rewriting history about how great Moyes is in the transfer market is one of the most laughable things in our fan base. It's just ridiculous. And Souček told us to go buy Soufal. We bought him. He wasn't scouted. He wasn't a brilliant piece of mastermind work from Moyes. He asked the player because he didn't know what to get, and he went, "I'm going to trust you because you've been a good player for me.
Yeah,
and we're going to go get him." Yes, they would have done a little bit of scouting to make sure that it wasn't just some randomer, but ultimately, his talent ID doesn't have it. He couldn't even identify in his team when Lanzini was so out of form that Fornals was the better player. It's absolute bollocks that he can find a player. It just winds me up.
Well, Rob Newman did come in, and last summer, like we mentioned, he did sign those players, and it was really interesting to see that he actually did a piece on the West Ham website last year in September, and he was asked all about these signings as we were going into the September period, and this was kind of one of the extracts that came from it. It says, Newman has been working around the clock with his team, with David Moyes and the board, recruiting top class players to bolster the men's first team squad and help create a team capable of controlling matches, being more clinical in the attacking third, and adapting to different in-game situations. Based on those 3 points there, Mike, I would say that arguably the summer transfer window we actually had, bringing in the likes of Agerd, bringing in the likes of Paqueta, bringing in the likes of Scamacca, all kind of sits true of what's said there. So is that then on the recruitment side of things that it hasn't worked out this season and we're back to playing how Moyes wants to play? It's like it doesn't add up, does it?
No, nothing ever adds up with West Ham. The simple truth of the matter is you don't buy those players for that manager. If you wanted those types of players, you have to look at the manager and go, that isn't the man to do what we've just said there.
Yeah.
No game or in no time has Moyes been a manager that has looked to control the ball or control games.
That was the point, wasn't it, in the summer, that he was going to transition into this manager, into this kind of style.
He couldn't do Manchester United. You telling me he goes to Manchester United with players who can control games and he can't control a sodding game? And you think that he's going to come to West Ham with lesser players to do that?
Yeah.
2 years was based on solid defensive work, great set pieces, and counter-attacking football.
Yeah.
This is pretty much the template that he's had all through his Everton years. Even at United, he couldn't work out how to hold the ball and had to went back to Old Faithful. He's done the same at West Ham. Did it at Sunderland, it went to shit. Or did it at Real Sociedad, it went to shit. It's only really worked again since he's come to West Ham. And it's a fundamental point in there is that we want to control games. We want to be better in this final third. And we also want to be able to change the in-game situations. When has the manager truly changed in in-game situations? Yeah. Unless it's the 80th minute. When has he looked to control the ball? Apart from in our Europa League and Europa Conference where we played, by and large in the earlier stages, subpar teams, have we controlled anything in terms of possession? Sometimes we did in the Premier League, but ultimately, no. We controlled the game, but we didn't control possession. And again, attacking. Moyes is pragmatic. Soufal's exact words were he's the ultimate pragmatist, even to the detriment sometimes to the game. The ends justifying the means. I'll probably slightly paraphrase, but that is almost word for word verbatim for what one of his players said, who also has gone on and said he doesn't like Moyes' tactics, but in the sense that he likes to be aggressive, he likes to get forward, he likes to take chances, and he likes to take risks. So how can you have that one message about those players you're signing, a player saying something like that, and it's completely juxtaposed by the man at the helm, and he's also deciding about what players to bring in?
So why do you think this is kind of coming out now about, and why do you think that Rob Newman, separate from David Moyes, is also under scrutiny of losing a job? Because David Sullivan is sat there. He's worked with David Moyes for how many years now? He knows the type of manager he is. He's probably got a close relationship with him, as Moyes has already said in press conferences before. So why is he now kind of twisting it a little bit? I know it's come from West Ham Football, which is Sean's, but he's kind of got those sources within the club. So it's kind of, there probably is some truth to this coming out.
Mouth in it, let's face it.
Yeah, so what is it that David Sullivan is seeing from Rob Newman that he doesn't like? Because I personally have liked the summer we've just had in terms of the personnel. If you look at it from a point of view of the players coming in, it hasn't worked for various reasons throughout this season. But I don't think that can be blamed from Rob Newman. I might be wrong, but that's my point of view. How do you see it? Why is David Sullivan kind of pushing this out now?
This whole situation, I tweeted it earlier, is it just epitomizes the endemic problems, chronic problems at West Ham and issues. We did exactly the same thing with Pellegrini. We assigned Husilius, who was someone he worked with before, and they brought him in. This complete and utter lack of understanding that recruitment level, that layer, has to be separate from the manager. They do not work with or for the manager. The manager works in the confines of what that recruitment agent or the recruiter / head of scouting, director of football, whatever you want to call it, works under them. You have a director of football, a sporting director, and between them, they come up with the idea, the philosophy of how the club wants to play. What type of formation really the club should be setting out in, because again, that helps you to centralize your thoughts and really focus your thoughts on what players to bring in.
Yeah.
Once you have that understanding, that philosophy, whether that be the ethos of bringing through youth players, signing young, energetic players, those kind of essentially set in stone, cast in stone testament kind of things.
Yeah.
Then you're going to go, right, which manager epitomizes that ethos? That are, I'll ask Will and Testament as to how we want to be.
Yeah.
And if the manager you currently have doesn't fit that, you have to remove that element and bring someone else who does.
I think that was the biggest problem when Rob Newman's come in to the job, where we were going through a period of success with Moyes, and it's hard to bring in someone like that and then completely change the whole operation in one go.
But he was brought in, Frankie, because he worked with Moyes. That was bigged up, even by I think by Sean as well, saying about how they work together. They've got a great working relationship. They know each other well. I'm sorry, why are you bringing in someone? They seem to do it so they can always have four guys. They don't have to take any level of responsibility themselves in that situation, because they can say, well, we gave the manager money and we gave his director of football, again, his director of football, not his director of football or head of scouting and coaching. So then they can create the ultimate four guys.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, we can say probably pretty categorically, I don't think a smart man who in the scouting would have potentially picked up Cornet. Now, he's been great for Burnley, terrible for us because of the injury. I don't think anyone would have picked up Danny Ings. The fact that he's looking at the likes of Julian Alvarez says what type of play Newman was looking for as a centre forward.
Well, in that piece as well, Mike, from September, Newman kind of outlines when they're saying what's the plans for next transfer window. He says, like, once this window ends in the summer, we're already starting to plan out for next summer, and also then potentially look at bringing those forward into January. So there's no way Danny Ings was on his list, right? There's no way. Went
straight away for Moffey.
Yeah.
That's that. If ever there's a sign that maybe that Antonio in their mind wasn't going to be at the club, or wasn't a player that they envisioned being at the club much beyond next year, should tell you everything you need to know. You don't sign Moffey to come in and be a supporting player to Antonio.
Yeah.
You bring him in to replace and upgrade and give yourself a long-term young version. Yeah. There's a reason why Moffey was then a January target. It's not just simply because of what he's doing at Lorient. It's because they've looked at it before and gone, we'll keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
See if he repeats another good season, because that is the player in next summer that we'll go for to replace Antonio. Because Antonio's in his last year. He might stay for that year, but we might move him on, try and get some money out of it. That's why Moffey got brought forward, because we were doing terrible. We needed a centre forward and someone that fitted the model that we currently have, but also a player who is adaptive and can play in multiple kind of types of roles, like he has with Lorient.
Yeah.
And again, it's a player who gives something different to Scamacca and could also complement Scamacca if played with him.
I think the main problem is, and we're just going to highlight it here, is that fundamentally David Moyes has way too much control over the transfer and dictating what actually happens, because Rob Newman even said himself back in September, if you look at the highlighted part, obviously it's always the manager's ultimate decision that we put players in front of them on the table. And, you know, we've got 8 very good players in the squad now based on the summer. So he's basically saying, I can do as much as I want to do. We can look at the Moffey situation. I've done my job, which is presenting a player, showing him data, backing up why we should sign this player. It's then up to Moyes to say yes or no. And like you mentioned, we've seen in the past, he said no to some excellent players and some excellent talent. Now, that is going to happen in football because there's just so many players that are probably brought to him. I can understand maybe the odd few, but it seems to be a recurring pattern and a recurring theme. And what I can't understand is if you were going to sign someone like Danny Ings and you still come out in press conferences saying you don't know how they really play and you're still learning how he is as a player when he's been in the Premier League for the best part of a decade, probably over a decade.
When he was at Real Sociedad.
Yeah, and it like there's no way that that came from Newman, and B, that Moyes shouldn't know what type of player Danny Ings is. So that's where I have the biggest problem with this whole recruitment strategy, transfer strategy, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that it's now coming out that Rob Newman might lose his job is bizarre to me. I don't understand why that's happened, because in my mind, we've had the best summer transfer window this club has ever seen, and probably will see if he continues to leave and we give David Sullivan full control of David Moyes again. Like, that is just going completely the other way to me.
Well, let's look at this way. Look how long he was in a job at Man City in the same role, like a head of scouting, and I think the head of recruiting, or at least the head of scouting. Obviously, they had a director of football who was the ex-Barcelona director of football. But regardless, he had that role at Man City for that long and brought in some brilliant players. Like quite a few of the new types of players that they have are due to Newman and his team and everything he did at Man City. It has 18 months at West Ham, and he's already deemed as not good enough. 18 months at West Ham, where he's recommended small players as well, players with little to no kind of fanfare, players who we've actually said no to. You know, some real quality players that we've actually just said, no, we're not going to move for. And it always comes back to, it's the scouting and the recruitment. Well, no, because if the manager gets the final say and the manager is saying no to these players and consistently saying no, the fact that the manager refused to go sign a good young centre-back in the summer because he wanted to keep Craig Dawson, only then to sell him in January, just shows that what can the recruitment do there?
Yeah,
the recruitment would have offered him something. They probably potentially would have offered him someone like Anil Ahmedhovic, who someone that myself and Sloth talked about, and I've talked about him for probably about 3 years.
I remember you speaking about him, yeah.
So he was named in the EFL Team of the Year as one of the best defenders in the EFL. Funny that, like, just tweeted out, but I'm not being. But you know, a player that I said we should sign goes on to be the best defender in the Championship, a league which our fans are now imploring we go back into. Like, that was a player we could sign for £4 million. A player who was deemed as the best defender in the Championship this year, or one of the best in the Championship this year, could have been our replacement for Craig Dawson. Oh, by the way, he's also homegrown because of his time at Nottingham Forest when he was a youngster. Yeah. It's things like that. Moyes won't sign young centre-backs or young centre-backs from other leagues unless it's something like Luzial, who can go in the under-23s and then
it won't be brought into the first team, because it comes down to the trust and the proven ability that Moyes likes to look out for, which is why you saw Danny Ings come in, and it's why you've seen however many times he's been here, he's tried for that caliber of player, and it's only now since Rob Newman came in that we started looking a bit more at those European players with a little bit of a younger, attraction. You look at Scamacca, still pretty young. Paqueta, not that old. We started to develop a little bit more of a better strategy in the summer.
We looked at Etikike as well, who obviously hasn't had a good time at PSG. But again, we looked at him, another outstanding young talent. Unfortunately, he's had a bad season at PSG, and injuries have been part of that. But again, we've been looking at much higher quality caliber players. I think even Marcos Leandro, who Brazilian centre forward, young Brazilian centre forward. Looked at him. I've already said it. I've said it again. Julian Alvarez is another player we've looked at. I'm pretty sure at one point we maybe looked at Enzo, who obviously went to Benfica and Chelsea.
Wouldn't surprise me, yeah.
There has been these players from South America we looked at, and we've not taken.
I think that is the main thing, isn't it?
Is another example. on a plate to us, literally on a plate, and he said no.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure he can do it in the league, in this league. Like, it's taken him a bit of time to get up and running in Leverkusen, but he's been banging in goals and assists in the last few games for Leverkusen. Again, the mind boggles, and I think the main thing, Frankie, as I said, is not their director of football or their head of scouting and their head of recruitment. It's David Moyes', and that's the point. David Moyes, in their mind, has failed. By association, he has failed. And because those players maybe haven't propelled us up the league, it's again, those players have failed by association and due to our league position. And all of that comes together as to where it's money that's been wasted. Now, next season, if someone comes in and gets that tune out of that team, say we get in Europa Conference, get really far in Europa League, have a very good solid season, all of a sudden, their short-sighted, short-minded approach looks completely stupid because actually that summer window was a success.
Yeah.
And you've just blown it all away out of a level of pettiness and just a lack of foresight. And I know I'm ranting and I know you want to say something, but I'm just going to finish it. But again, it's this lack of understanding that in football nowadays, you have a technical director. It deals with the kind of that day-to-day business operations and managing with that kind of side of things. You have a sporting director and a director of football who then manage the sporting aspects. Director of football is going to be involved more on that scouting side, the analytics and so on. Are going to report up probably to the sporting director, who then has the overarching view on how the club is going to be from a sporting perspective, what type of manager they want, what type of football they want to play, how we're going to bring through youth, how that's going to be part of the club. The women's team, everything is encompassed within that sporting director one, and also has insight and input into transfers because works directly with director of football.
Yeah.
They then have conversations with the manager as to, okay, where do you feel we need to strengthen? Okay, what kind of things are you looking for in a player? And they go out and find those players and bring them to the manager. The manager doesn't go out and find them themselves and then sign them off. It's ultimately, these are the players we are signing. These are the ones that fit the model we want to play and the model that you and fit the dynamics you have requested. Now make them work. And if the player fails, it's not on the player, it's on the manager, because the manager is the one who's been brought in to implement a style. He is to come out and said, these are the characteristics I want in these individual positions within that style. They've gone out and found those characteristics, those dynamics, and then it's up to the manager the manager really is the one then in charge of dynamics in terms of fitting them in. But as we've seen with Moyes, he doesn't do it. Even with Fornals this year, he's talked about him being a brilliant player, but he just hasn't been able to find the time, which is the biggest liberty and piss take I've ever heard, because it is actually and literally your job to find a space in a team for a player and to find time for that player to play.
Yeah, I think that is the main problem, isn't it? It's just the structural mess. We've spoken about it before, about how the whole structure of the club is set up, and it's going to continue that way. And like you mentioned there, if Moyes is failing, Newman comes as part of that package, which is why it's coming out that Newman will lose his job as well. So yeah, it's really interesting that this is coming out now. So I'm expecting there'll be a little bit of more movement once the season ends, and we'll see what happens with this whole structure, because there's so much up in the air at the moment. But what do you guys think? Do you think that the summer was good? Do you think the recruitment was okay from Newman for his first season, or do you think that he is maybe partly to blame as well? So yeah, make sure to let us know in the comments. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new as well. And yeah, Michael, until next time, one thing left to say.
Come on, you
Come on, you irons.